guys can sit down.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's going on?
We're
There's like a media or something.
It's a press conference.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Christian Sport Fight Fellowship. This is our November gathering, and I'm glad that all of you can make it. You guys are very dedicated. There's a high percentage of it raining, so by you guys coming shows a lot of dedication, and I'm really impressed by all of you who came. Today is going to be different. First, we're going to be riding to Twin Peaks. Secondly, we have a Thanksgiving potluck after, so you're welcome to come back for some free food. And then thirdly, my wonderful girlfriend is going to share a message on patience, and it's something that I struggle with, so it's something that I'm looking forward to hearing more about. So Kat will get us going.
So as Colin mentioned, for this month's message, we're going to talk about patience. So to be honest, I was really hesitant to talk about this topic because I struggle with patience a lot. So I'll just give you some examples from my daily life. So at work, when I send an email to my coworker or a colleague, I'll sit there and with my inbox open and I'll keep refreshing the page until their response comes in. And then the more time that passes and I don't get a response, I get very restless. And I have very little patience on the road when I'm driving. So if someone in front of me is driving too slow, I most likely will, and I'll cut to the lane next to them. I'll look to the side to see who they are, and then I'll speed up past them. And if I want to be dramatic, I might even get back into the lane in front of them to make sure that, they know what the actual speed you should be going is. So as embarrassing and hard as it can be to admit that you struggle with patience, it's nice to know that I know for myself that I'm not alone in this. So I did a Google search for how to have more patience, and the results are really endless. So there's no shortage of YouTube videos that teach you self-help techniques. On the first page of the results page, I saw articles from Psychology Today, the Huffington Post, the New York Times, and even Oprah's lifestyle site. They have a wellness category, and they have an article on patience. And then, unsurprisingly, there's also a TED Talk on patience. So I feel like if there's a TED Talk on something, then it's probably pretty important. I also did a Google search for quotes about patience. Maybe you've heard of some of them. Patience is a virtue. Trust the process. Good things take time. And good things come to those who wait. Based on those quotes, I think we can conclude that patience is ultimately a good thing. It's an admirable quality that someone can have. And sometimes it's even associated with a feeling of accomplishment or reward, just because you maybe overcame something that was difficult or challenging. But it's also a little bit counterintuitive to think of patience or having to have patience as good. Just because in those times when you had to be patient or you were struggling to have patience, it wasn't necessarily a good or ideal situation or circumstance. Personally, when I reflect on the times when I needed to have patience, I don't feel very happy or good. I actually feel very bitter and annoyed. This past month or a few months ago, my best friend and I went on a trip to Europe, and our flight from San Francisco to Lisbon, Portugal was delayed. And so we missed our connecting flight from Portugal to Spain, and we had to wait at the airport for 10 hours for the next flight. And then this past week, my commute home from work, so it should take 26 minutes, but it took 56 minutes. So again, a lot of times in these situations where we have to be patient, it's not really enjoyable to reflect on or relive those moments. But what if I told you that these moments are actually used for good, for our good? As followers of Christ, we build our lives on the sovereignty of God, and we know that with Him leading our lives, nothing is really a coincidence and nothing just happens. And so that means that we can trust that all things, so the good, but also the bad and the ugly, they're ultimately being worked together for our good. So Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Just looking into your own life, maybe you've been unemployed for longer than you thought you would be, or maybe you want to get married and settle down and have a family, but your relationships never work out, or it's really hard to find the right person. Think of the most annoying person in your life. It could be a friend or a family member. It could be a coworker, a neighbor, anyone. It could be a barista at Starbucks who got your order wrong and you had to wait an extra 15 minutes for your drink. When we trust that God works all things together for our good, we can be sure that in those types of circumstances, in those relationships and in those hard times, God ultimately has a purpose. And on top of that, he's using it to build our character and to make us more like Christ. This is ultimately how he restores and reconciles and transforms the brokenness within us. And he does this work in us continuously, day after day, when we decide to follow Jesus and ask God to lead our lives. Earlier, I mentioned some examples of maybe situations or times where you're being challenged to have patience. So whether or not you're being successful, I don't know. And I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know what you've been through. But I hope that you can find peace, comfort, and hope in the fact that there's a God who works constantly in the background, working all things together for your good according to his purpose, and that in the hard times you can lean on him. Proverbs 3 verses 5 through 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Some questions to think about are, number one, if you feel comfortable doing so, share about a time when you've struggled to have patience. Number two, what was the outcome and how might God have used it for your good? And number three, reflect on and rest in the fact that God works all things together for your good and that you can always lean on him, trusting in his plan and purpose.
selfie?
Sure.